The tranquil Welsh seaside town of Llandudno was anything but peaceful as hundreds of furious farmers staged a dramatic protest outside the Welsh Labour conference. With signs screaming, "Enough is enough," and "No farmers, no food," and a convoy of tractors blocking the promenade, the message to Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer was unmistakable. The farming community has reached its breaking point. Inside the venue, Starmer addressed a packed crowd of Labour delegates, staunchly defending his government's controversial budget, which includes seismic changes to inheritance tax rules for farms. These reforms, hailed by Labour as necessary for fiscal stability, are being branded by farmers as a direct assault on their livelihoods. The stakes couldn't be higher. This is not just about politics, but about the survival of Britain's rural way of life. Yet, in a shocking move, Starmer refused to meet with the protesters or acknowledge them in his speech, a decision that has ignited a firestorm of criticism. Is Labour turning its back on rural Britain? And how will this confrontation shape the future of the party's fragile relationship with the countryside? Now, let's delve into the unfolding chaos surrounding Labour's budget bombshell. In the last 24 hours alone, tensions have escalated, with farming unions warning of a disastrous impact on food production and rural life. Meanwhile, Labour insiders are said to be deeply divided, with some accusing the Treasury of arrogance for ignoring pleas to soften the policy. Don't go anywhere, because we're unpacking the full scandal, from the heart of the protests to the heated clashes in Westminster. Hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with us for the explosive details. For decades, Agricultural Property Relief, APR, has been a cornerstone of British farming. This tax exemption has allowed family farms to be passed down through generations without incurring devastating inheritance tax bills. But under Labour's new rules, set to take effect in April 2026, farms worth more than £1 million will lose this exemption and instead face a 20% tax, half the standard inheritance tax rate, but still a crushing blow to rural families. The Treasury insists the changes are fair, arguing that 40% of APR benefits have gone to the wealthiest 7% of claimants. But to farmers like Gareth Wyn-Jones, a Conwy farmer and broadcaster, this reform is nothing short of betrayal. Speaking from the protest, Wyn-Jones painted a dire picture of the challenges facing rural Britain.
This government has made the one decision which is destroying the morale, the mental well-being and the economic viability of farms. We don't work for ourselves, we work to produce food for others.
This isn't just a tax change, it's a threat to our entire way of life. People don't understand that without farmers, there's no food on the table. Farmers are warning that the new rules will force many to sell off land to cover tax bills, disrupting food production and driving up prices. The poorest in society will suffer the most, Wyn-Jones added, blasting Labour for abandoning its promise to protect vulnerable communities. Starmer stands firm. Inside venue Cymru, Starmer delivered a defiant speech, making no mention of the protesters gathered just outside. "I will defend our budget decisions all day long," he declared, positioning the reforms as tough but necessary measures to stabilise the economy. Starmer framed the budget as a turning point for Britain, saying it marked the end of austerity and the beginning of long-term investment in infrastructure and jobs. "Politicians must stop insulting your intelligence with easy answers," he said, taking a swipe at critics of the reforms. "It's hard, of course it is hard, but these are the trade-offs we must face if we are serious about building a better future for Britain." But to the farmers standing in the cold just metres away, these words rang hollow. Many viewed Starmer's refusal to engage with them as a sign of contempt for rural issues. Abby Reader, deputy president of NFU Cymru, voiced the frustration of many in her community. "We've spent years warning the government about the unique challenges facing agriculture, but they've chosen to ignore us," she said. "This policy is reckless and will hurt thousands more farmers than the Treasury claims." Behind the scenes, Labour's inheritance tax reforms have sparked bitter divisions within the government. DEFRA, the department responsible for rural affairs, reportedly learned about the changes the night before the budget was announced, a revelation that has fueled accusations of arrogance and mismanagement. DEFRA officials had proposed exempting older farmers, possibly those over 80, from the tax, but the Treasury dismissed the idea outright. The Treasury maintains that fewer than 500 farms a year will be affected, but farming unions dispute this figure, arguing that nearly 66% of estates could face new tax burdens. The National Farmers Union, NFU, has called for an immediate impact assessment, accusing the government of playing fast and loose with the numbers. Even within Labour, some MPs are questioning the wisdom of the policy. This change risks alienating rural voters without raising significant revenue, one Labour insider admitted. The Treasury estimates the reforms will generate £560 million, a drop in the ocean compared to the £22 billion fiscal hole Labour inherited. Labour's rural woes extend beyond inheritance tax. In a move that has further alienated countryside voters, Starmer ruled out compensation for Wales from the HS2 rail project, arguing that heavy rail is not devolved. Critics say this decision reflects a broader pattern of neglecting rural Britain in favour of urban priorities. The backlash has emboldened Labour's political opponents. Conservative Shadow Environment Minister Robbie Moore accused the government of arrogance, while Lib Dem spokesperson Tim Farron called the reforms a disaster for family farms. Even within Labour ranks, murmurs of dissent are growing, with some MPs privately urging Starmer to rethink the policy. The inheritance tax reforms come at a precarious time for Britain's farming industry, which is already grappling with soaring costs, labour shortages and climate change. Dairy farmer Abby Reader warned that the changes could exacerbate the country's food security crisis. We should be very alive to the fact that it's not guaranteed we'll produce the same amount of food year on year, she said, citing geopolitical instability and climate change as compounding factors. Experts warn that the policy could trigger a domino effect, forcing small farms to sell out to larger agribusinesses and pushing up food prices for consumers. This isn't just a rural issue, said Clive Bailey, founder of the Farming Forum. It's a national crisis. The Llandudno protest is just the beginning. Farmers are planning a massive rally in London next week, vowing to take their fight to the heart of Westminster. This is a battle for our survival, Bailey said. We will not be silenced. As protests grow louder, the political fallout for Labour is becoming harder to ignore. For a party that once championed working families, the perception of abandoning rural Britain could have far-reaching consequences. The clash over inheritance tax is shaping up to be a defining moment for Sir Keir Starmer's premiership. Will he double down on the reforms, risking a rural revolt that could weaken Labour's electoral chances? Or will he listen to the growing chorus of voices calling for compromise? One thing is clear. The stakes couldn't be higher. For Britain's farmers, this is not just about taxes, it's about preserving a way of life that has sustained the nation for centuries. And for Labour, the question is whether it can reconcile its urban base with the rural communities that feel increasingly left behind. Stay tuned as this scandal unfolds, because this is a battle far from over, and don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel.